Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if this is your first time here. I am your host, Davin James, glad to be here with all of you guys here today. If you go on to enjoy today's episode, please consider leaving a like and even subscribing to the channel. If you subscribe, make sure you hit the bell for notifications, that way you don't miss any future notifications that comes from my channel. Today I'm talking about a young woman by the name of Kaylee Murhart. She's 20 years old and she's from the state of South Carolina. When she was 19 years old, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And that's a huge diagnosis as it is. That's a lot to take in for a young person at the age of 19 in my opinion. She decided to deal with that by going into drugs. She started with smoking marijuana and then going into ecstasy. From then she started smoking ecstasy, but then decided to inject it into herself when 20 years old. To an incident where she decided, when she was really bad on drugs, to rip out her own eyes completely. And through this article I discovered, I talk about her story and how she feels 6 years later that she's in a much happier place, even though she's blind, but she's no longer dependent on drugs. So with that being said, let's get on with today's episode, shall we? Woman who ripped out her own eyes says she's happier more than 6 years after she committed the horrifying act. She quotes in saying, "I'd rather be blind than dependent on drugs." Kaylee Murhart from Anderson, South Carolina was a straight-A student before she permanently scarred herself in a drug-fueled psychotic frenzy. Kaylee, who was just 20 at the time of the accident, had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and turned to drugs such as marijuana and ecstasy. However, it was one strange high that hit differently when she was just 19 years old, as her friend gave her a joint laced with crystal meth. Jesus Christ. From there, the young woman became hooked, even transitioning from smoking the hard drug to injecting it. She told Cosmopolitan, "I long been a religious Christian. The high made me feel practically close to God." The then teen had been studying the Bible while high on drugs, and believed the meth was a ticket to bring her even closer to God. After Thanksgiving 2017, Kaylee struggled with her addiction and had tried to stop the habit a handful of times before agreeing to check into a rehab. However, the night before check-in turned fateful, as she reportedly injected methamphetamine in February 2018, which ended up in her tearing her eyes out with her bare hands and squishing them. Oh, like this just gives me like a bad horror movie vibes, like the really sick and twisted, sadistic kind of movies, like the Saw movies, for example. This one kind of reminds me of in some ways. Recounting the moment, she said, "I remember thinking that someone had to sacrifice something important to right the world, and that person was me. I thought everything would end abruptly and everyone would die if I didn't tear my eyes out immediately. I pushed my thumb, pointer and middle finger into each eye. I gripped each eyeball, twisted and pulled out until each eye popped out the socket. It felt like a massive struggle, the hardest thing I ever had to do. Yeah, I would imagine so. Because I could no longer see. I didn't know if there was blood, but I know the drugs numbed the pain." She was sat outside the South Main Chapel and Mercy Center when she inflicted the injury on herself, and said the church pastor found her screaming, "I want to see the light," while holding her eyeballs in her hands. Well, you haven't seen anything after doing that, but yeah, sure. Kaylee was promptly airlifted to Greenville Memorial Hospital's trauma unit, where medics performed emergency surgery to remove what was left of her eyes, and was left then fully blind. 6 years on since the tragic incident, Kaylee said her life is better than it was before she plunged into perpetual darkness. The 26-year-old said, "Of course, there are times when I fully get upset about my situation, practically on nights where I can't fall asleep. But truthfully, I'm happier now than I was before all this happened. I'd rather be blind than dependent on drugs. The traumatic event was the final push to convince Kaylee to go to rehab and give up on drugs once and for all. She now wears prosthetic eyeballs, which she received in 2020, and says she keeps a positive perspective. Activities I used to enjoy, like playing guitar and learning piano, are harder now that I'm blind, but I'm still optimistic. When I stub my toe or my knee, I think, well, it probably saved me from walking into a wall and hitting my face. Yeah, I mean, like, that's one way of looking at it. Sure, why not? Let's go with that. So first of all, I just want to say that I personally feel like she's brave for coming out and talking about this story, making it a public story for people to see and read and give their own sort of comments and judgments to. I can't even begin to understand what was going through her head at the time when she was on these drugs, and what was going through her head when she decided to rip out her eyeballs. Like, unless you're in that situation, none of us can understand what was going through her head at the time. And like, many people be like, oh well, it's her fault for getting involved in drugs and getting hooked on drugs. Sure, I get that completely. Everyone has their own opinion. Everyone has their own sense of right and wrong. I feel like she might be helping someone out there by telling her story and making it more of an awareness about how dangerous, even though we all know how dangerous it could be, but how dangerous life on drugs can actually be, and some of the torments it can actually have on you, and some of the effects it can have on you, not just mentally but also physically. There was an article somewhere where like her mum was talking about how she feels about the whole situation. I can't find it at the moment, so I might have dreamt that, I don't know. But if I do find it and there's people respond well to this episode, I will try and do it. But as always, feedback is always appreciated and welcomed. If you want to share your feelings down below in terms of the story, how you feel about it, whether or not you've heard it before, or if you heard of another story similar to this, then please let me know down below in the comments section. Until then, take care, stay safe, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye for now.